Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, we had a few technical difficulties in the back, but we appreciate you being here on a very hot and humid afternoon. I'm Yvan Champagne, Chief Carbon Officer with Carbon AI, and we really appreciate you joining us today for our session on offset market quality and integrity through DMRV. Today we're tackling a really important topic that we believe is critical to any pathway to keeping 1.5 alive and scaling and accelerating credible, meaningful greenhouse gas mitigation and removals. And that is a migration to digital measurement, reporting, and verification, or DMRV tools, platforms, and applications. We're sitting in the AIDA pavilion here because all of us and the organizations that we represent are AIDA partners. And we share belief in the power of markets to solve the climate change challenge. Specifically, there's no other way to mobilize capital in a more direct fashion to reduce or remove emissions than carbon markets in greenhouse gas reduction or removal projects. But there's a problem. First, carbon markets and offsets have had a pretty rough year. And that's due to some very high-profile challenges with a number of projects in the market that fell significantly short on integrity, transparency, and auditability, which left buyers and policymakers and the public at large to rightfully question if greenhouse gas reductions and projects and their emissions are real. The second challenge is scalability. Those of you who, like me, may have cut their teeth in offset project development in Carbon 1.0 or 2.0 when carbon was a smaller industry. We got used to more manual systems, processes that worked when maybe hundreds of projects and millions of tons were being generated annually. But as the industry has grown, both in scale and mission critical importance, where the industry needs to deliver hundreds of millions of tons of reductions, those early tools and systems can't scale to where the market needs to go, and it's not an option. We need to do more. We need to make it easier, faster, better, and we need to deliver it with better transparency, integrity, and auditability. So today we're going to have an enlightening discussion on this critical topic, and we're joined by a great panel of leaders that are really on the DMRV frontier. And so we have, joining us today, we have Venkatesh Sharma, Senior Director, Technology Solutions at Verra. We have Joe Madden, CEO of Future, formerly Expansive. We have Juan Duran, who is the Executive Director with Eco-Registry. And we have Ryan Arsenault, CEO of Carbon AI, my partner at Carbon AI. So the format of the session today will be introductions. We'll have each of the speakers give a quick background on what they're doing, specifically in the area of DMRV. We'll have some opening remarks. Then we're going to open it up. We're going to have a question and answer session, really hopefully getting some really interesting insights on what's happening in this really important topic. And then we're going to leave about hopefully 15 to 20 minutes at the end for questions from the floor. So without further ado, let's open it up. Venkatesh, want to tell us some exciting things from Verra?
Certainly. Maybe folks from the back would come up here. We have empty chairs here.
Do you want to come up or do you want
Sure.
to?
Colleagues, come up here in the front. We have an empty chair. So how did it go? Your slides on? Thank you very much for a nice intro. And thank you very much to you all as you join to listen to us here about DMRV. I am Venkatesh Sharma. I work at Verra as a Senior Director of Technology Solutions, and in my job, I try to help this carbon market through the use of technology. I have a background in software engineering and forest carbon science, and I have worked in this sector for 23 years now. If you don't know Verra, Verra is a standard body, and we run about 4 standards, and it's a non-profit established in 2007. And we are currently leader in GHG crediting program, and we have so far issued 1 billion ton of BCUs, over 1,800 projects in close to 100 countries worldwide. And before we get in the details of DMRV, this could mean different things to different people. So from the perspective of what we are going to focus today, it's really about a tool or software or platform that can help us measure, report, and verify the emissions. So that is in essence. And we have been doing MRV for long, and that is the manual process. And MRV, we have been doing it for assessing baseline, assessing project, leakage, additionality, all these things. If we do them digitally, that's a DMRV, very simple. And why are we doing digital MRV is really analog processes are costly, slow, error prone. When you do manually in Excel or CSV files and all these things, they are error prone. It could be intentional or unintentional, but we are focusing mostly on unintentional error, that are accidental errors that we may not be able to easily track if the process gets complicated. And so DMRV system can actually help us avoid those errors at first. We can do a lot of automation in the process. That way things could move faster. And if data are coming in digitally, then we can put checks algorithmically, then we don't have to do the manual check. And if we can achieve that ecosystem of softwares and technologies, then our verification or validation of the credits becomes less manual and less manual. That's where the bottleneck is. And we hope to open up that time, the blockage. So that's our intention with the DMRV and rational. And this is a very, very simple diagrammatic view of how the DMRV should look like or could look like in near future. We have projects as before. We have industrial projects, we have renewable projects, we have AFLU projects, and now we are measuring from platform directly, for example. So satellite remote sensing, sensors attached to those processes which are supposed to either increase or decrease the emissions. So sensors are measuring the data. And then these sensors will feed data into some place where we can standardize the input and output. And because we are not assuming one giant platform that does everything, rather they are federated. So everybody can have their DMRV. But how do they talk to each other is that common schema. So as long as we have same schema, I'm a project proponent, I use a DMRV built by somebody. Tomorrow I can go on to another DMRV if they provide better services, better technology, and so on. So we check, the software itself checks for discrepancy in the data using algorithms, runs the calculation, creates a report. That report is what we need to be able to issue a credit. And then if needed, we can put alerts. Okay, this data could be, a little incorrect, but they may or may not be incorrect. In that case, we have to manually verify. For example, if I have a project, I know but this particular geographic locations, land-based carbon projects contain so much amount of tons of carbon per hectare that I can measure using remote sensing, LiDAR, or whatever technology. Then with the algorithms like machine learning and AI, we can see this data looks valid. And then we don't have to go and validate that data anyway. However, in some cases, go to California, we just suddenly see redwood forest which contains a massive amount of carbon. That is not incorrect. It's just data that is different, then we might have to verify in some cases. Same thing with the census-based monitoring. So algorithms can do much of those checking for us in the hope that we can certify those platforms. For example, if we can say this platform is certified, then we are not validating or verifying individual projects. We are validating the platform. It's just like in US, when you file for taxes, they don't check every record of you because they trust the platform itself. And then they do sampling to figure out if someone has intentionally made some error. So that way we can move these pipeline steps much faster. That's our DMRV system. And then this is a process where we are currently walking at Vera. Potential promise for digital transformation is, market can scale through digitalization. We can mobilize finances. Now, financial organizations also require some sort of process based on which they can make the prediction, projections, and investments. So this kind of DMRV platform can help achieve those. And then we have to be a little bit practical and realistic too. We cannot digitalize everything once, right? So we're gonna go slow. So slow but fast. We allow analog process to continue while we work on digital process here. So we start with digital project templates, we digitalize methodologies, so we ensure data are collected digitally, we do processing analysis of data. Now we have to think how we make the current process of validation and verification streamlined with the digital process. Once we have achieved that, we are right there to do certification of DMRV platform, credits issued, and then they can be further decentralized or what we need to do with those VCUs, the next step. It's nothing. It looks complicated, but essentially you use the calculations, you measure, you report, you verify, you do it all over again. Since this is a redundant task, in the last 15 years or so, I believe we have perfected that manual solution that can be automated now. That's the only goal here. Example, we have digital projects, digital methodologies that are in process. We have all these projects that we know where they are. We have their attributes that we can see. We can now monitor these projects. Like in this graph, there is example projects. This is a real project. You can see how we are tracking deforestation. If we have achieved that, this is example because we haven't validated the real data of the, what if there are any errors or not. But eventually we'll be able to do that, and then we don't have to manually verify. We will have a scale system. We have thousands of projects. Systems are validating them. If there is an error, we will be notified. By us, I mean any stakeholders would like to be transparent about the process. So that's the scale. But DMRV come with the challenges and risks too. So I'm not gonna go over the benefits because we know the benefits, that's why we're talking. There are some challenges that we need to address. How do we stay consistent with ongoing non-digital processes? We need to ensure interoperability of system, not only with the DMRV platform themselves, but other standards as well. And then information management and security, this is really a problem, in any areas where we use digital technologies. That's all I had to say today.
Thank you very much, Big Tash. Joe, you want to come up? Tell us a little bit about Expansive and Future, what you guys have done. Great, thank you.
You're right, the slot at the end of the day, but there's I think a happy hour after this, so
there is.
So we did get that benefit. So first off, pleasure to be here. I think the first time I was at a AIDA COP event was maybe 2015 when we were actually conceptualizing what could be done with technology and things like that. We were probably at the time a little bit ahead of, I think we had published a paper around all the sort of big data, distributed ledger applications, things like that. And then we went out and proved a few things. And then we realized there was no market infrastructure. So what we originally launched, what I would call Expansive 1.0, was really around how do you actually scale up markets broadly and integrate largely things that currently aren't valued in markets into markets. So it was really a front-end digital MRV platform at the time, and then we realized there was no market infrastructure. That became Expansive, what everybody knows today. So we went out and built market infrastructure, registries, spot market, market data, all the things that you would need. And we continued to sort of invest in technology at the time. And then about a year ago, we said, look, there's some real challenges in the market. We went to our board and made a recommendation that we spin out something that would be independent, have its own governance, and be completely separate to address some of the larger challenges and systemic challenges, and that became Future. So that's what I'm doing. I was sort of dumb enough to volunteer for that job. So now I'm doing this and building this out. So I don't know how I click this. Let's see. So, and we just published a white paper about, I think about 2 weeks ago, So all of this is sort of in our white paper, and I'm here because there's some things that the Ministry of Climate and MOCA are announcing in relation to some of the things that we're doing. So let's see here. And then, click. Do we have a manual click? Oh, there we go. So, so the challenge that we're looking to solve is not just related to carbon markets. So, carbon markets, the way we're looking at this, is a subset of a major challenge, which is really the integration of new information into the global economy. So, our challenge from my perspective is that the capital market system can't ingest and use information in the way that it needs to. So this diagram here is actually a whiteboard session with Jean Rogers at Blackstone, she's the head of ESG at Blackstone, and the left is what we drew about a little over a year ago on her whiteboard, where she basically said, look, I have to deploy tens of billions in the energy transition that's either tagged to energy transition or sustainable finance, and I can't afford the risk for my LPs if something falls down. So really sort of greenwashing. And if we think about greenwashing, it's at the core the same issue that we have in carbon where things fall down. So what she identified was really that you had an isolation of capital formation, environmental claims, and reporting over the life cycle of things. And then what we also identified is that really this is a data problem, but it's more of an information than a data problem. So there's lots of data out there, but we're not making information from it. So what we architected with about probably 5 or 6 of us in a room was a unified system where we abstracted up, used some numeric identifiers, and then took some of the things that we had built out in the fuel space to standardize data. And so that's what you see over on the right there. And so, can't see this, but I'll kind of walk through this. So that's interesting, it just blocked that all out, but I can talk to this. So SMART is the standard market and registry template. It's something that we developed over the course of about 5 or 6 years. And what it is a standardized approach to data governance and roles within a market system. And SMART, it can be applied to generate SMART programs. SMART programs can effectively identify and deliver almost any outcome as long as you know what you're looking for. So if you want to understand the carbon intensity of a barrel of crude oil, you can align data sources along a set of roles and deliver that. If you want to understand what's going on in a forest, you can align and correlate data and find out what that is. And what those to us are SMART outcomes. So it's a very high-level standardized template, and those SMART outcomes then can be referenced for all kinds of things. So that could be the issuance of an asset onto an asset registry. It could be to meet KPIs for performance in a sustainably linked loan or bond. So SMART, this is effectively a generic template that is like Legos for building outcomes that you want to understand. And those outcomes could issue carbon. So there we go. So SMART programs programmatically encode governance. So we don't see this just as a data issue. We really think of this as a governance issue. So you can have lots of data, and you can have people that are maybe self-interested parties that are supplying 2 sides of the same data source. So there's a lot of governance that goes into who can do what in any given program. Audit functions, quality assurance, and all of those, they have to be different roles and different players in order to ensure a legitimate outcome. And then the SMART outcomes, well, let's go back. And then, I'll get this down. It doesn't like SMART outcomes. But anyway, now we learned. Oh, there it disappears. Anyway, so the SMART outcomes can be referenced in finance, in carbon markets, and they can work across, and it's open, so it can be used by different certifications, and the same information can be used for different reasons. That doesn't mean you can double count. That means that you can just reference the data for different purposes. And then we created what we call the link system. And the link system is an extensible set of numeric identifiers that allows you to basically distribute information. So that information could be distributed into the capital markets, like institutional banks. An example was yesterday we made an announcement where we have a partnership and an integration with NEMU 21. That is a platform that digitizes credit agreements, and then we can actually deliver the very same way that we would deliver an outcome into or support an asset issued onto a carbon registry. You can deliver that same outcome into a digitized credit agreement. So you can fulfill the KPI within that. What that means is now you have capital formation happening around the same data set. So the capital provider can access the same information about the underlying assets, for example, that's being issued. That's a transformational sort of step here. The second thing is once you have an asset that's trading or transferring back and forth on a registry, at some point it becomes a claim, and then we have a numeric identifier there that we will call a permanent retirement number. And that permanent retirement number then can be enable and deliver into reporting platforms. So think platforms like Persephone or Watershed or any of those. So it's just a standardized way to sort of connect big platforms and pieces of an overall system. And so these two things work in conjunction. So Smart and Link are connected. Smart really connects into the larger physical world. And then Link really delivers into finance and markets. It's really simple. It's complex underneath, but it's a very simple approach what we're talking about here. And Smart, as I mentioned, has a number of roles. These are an example. So far, I think we have about 27 or 28 roles identified. But you have someone that owns a protocol, so they own IP. You have someone that is a primary data provider. That could be a hydrogen plant. That could be a forest. That could be a farm. You have secondary data provider. You can have multiple. That could be a satellite or a sensor or a drone. And then in the case where someone's issuing an asset, they're usually the people that own an asset registry, so they're issuing onto a registry. And there's a number of other roles, but a role, for example, could be a landowner that has a claim to a financial benefit for something that they're doing in a nature-based solution. So there's all kinds of roles that can be configured in a Smart program. And what that allows you to do is basically create a factory for outcomes. So we have almost unlimited data sources that can be integrated within the system. So that means, I'll give an example, and this is a specific satellite provider that I'm talking about, but and I won't say them so we don't say that, but in this case, you could take a satellite provider that has a hyperspectral satellite. They're able to track methane in a natural gas pipeline. They're also able to track with a different setting on the satellite, they can track the carbon intensity of a forest. So they can integrate one time and use multiple applications of that satellite in a system. So as you build, I'm going to give up on this thing. So anyway, so as a satellite can integrate one time and then start to be used for multiple different program applications. And they can also be part of an economic framework, so they can get paid for the information that they're providing to the system. And then those outcomes that can then be distributed into credit instruments, bond instruments, used for issuance of assets onto registries, and then ultimately into reporting platforms. So on the other side, the beneficiaries of that are the financial institutions, the regulators, and the derivatives markets. So everybody can work off a common framework. So that's effectively what we're doing here. And this is just an example that we're presenting here. It's a natural capital asset up on the right-hand side. That's a forest. In this case, it's Cultivo. And you can see the information is being aggregated, delivered down into a Smart outcome. That Smart outcome can then be referenced over on the right lower and issue assets into registries that can then go into spot markets and trade. Ultimately, they're retired. They can be then delivered into reporting platforms. But then we can codify all of that information for sovereign rights, landholder rights, things like that, and deliver that into a digitized credit instrument. So you have all of a sudden you move from something that was relatively disconnected to something that's very connected. So you have a forest connected all the way into the capital markets. So the outcomes from the forests are going into the capital markets and the lending agreements, while the assets issued off that are going into registries and markets. So that's what we're doing, and the idea here is really to create an open system that other people can come in and build on. So the whole idea here is to enable all of the different participants in these markets, different certifications, to participate and be able to start to interface and scale and do what they do really well. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Joe. Juan, do you want to tell us what Eco-Registry is up to? Thank you.
Thank you, Ivan, and thanks Carbonea for the invitation and Yeta for having us here. So I don't have a presentation, so I will explain a little bit what Eco-Registry does and how we do it, and what we are doing right now on the area of digitized MRV solutions. So Eco-Registry, so I'm from Colombia, and actually why we started Eco-Registry is very simple. I kept hearing a lot from project developers, from communities, that it was very difficult for them to open an account on a platform, that it was very difficult for them to access the market. They didn't understand the market. They didn't understand the process of how to issue a carbon unit. And then afterwards, they didn't understand how to sell carbon credits. Those were the issues that we were facing on that time. That was in 2016. So we started developing a platform that was actually more accessible. And the focus was that the platform is developed like in modules, in different modules, where they can upload all the information and the platform guides you module per module. Let's say the first module is the validation stage, then you upload all the documentation, all the information, and you submit it to approval by the validation and verification body and by the issuance body, the standard. It could be Vera, it could be another one. We work with 3 of them. The biggest one is Ser Carbono. So at the end, what happens is that during that review, they might have some change requests, for example. So the change request must be done through the platform and not through per email or per WhatsApp or something, so that there is a traceability of all the changes that are made. Then once each stage is finished, then they have to do a digital signature to acknowledge that that stage is finished, and it goes to the next stage and the next stage, and so on and so forth. The best thing is that we developed it on a blockchain system so that nobody can change the information that has been fed to the platform, and every single time that the signature goes on each stage, all that information is secured on our blockchain-based system. Then at the end, when it's issued, when the carbon credits are issued, then they go to the specific accounts of the project developer, or the project developer can define actually if they want the credits to go to different communities, to 10 communities, and in which percentage they should go to each community, something like that. That was actually very important to comply with the requirements by the indigenous communities in Latin America. And the other part, how do we access then the market? And that's when we started building an API framework that allows us to connect to any system, very simple. We were the first registration platform that got connected to the Climate Action Data Trust, and we are connected to Expansive, we are connected to ACX, to CIX, to different exchanges around the world, and also to the newcomers, the Web3 based solutions. We have a way to connect into those systems, and it is all administered like by the account owner on Eco-Registry. That's about what Eco-Registry does today. We have issued more than 75 or 80 million credits, and a lot have been retired. I don't remember the exact number. Now, about digitized MRV solution. We see digitized MRV solution as 3 important points. The first thing is measurement. We need to gather some measurements to define how we are, or which model we are going to apply to those measurements to quantify the tons of CO2 that we are reducing or avoiding or capturing. So let's take a very simple example like a forestry project. Okay, we need to gather, I don't know, temperature, pressure, soil nutrients, also LiDAR imaging, as Venkatesh said, satellite imaging if possible, any type of information that we can gather from to later feed a model that will give us how each one of the trees, actually the tree type, or tree origin, a lot of things, how the tree will grow in time, and then we can see how the soil and tree will grow, and we can see how many tons of CO2 are captured. That's for the first, that's the more difficult, and I don't know why I started with that one, but the easiest example is actually solar energy. It's very simple, radiation, temperature, and pressure, and then you can quantify how much a panel can generate in energy. It's very simple. So the first step is how to ensure that that data that we are collecting is right or wrong. That's the first question that we need to address. The second question, is the model that we are applying right or wrong? And that's why we do the same always, and we are engaging in many pilots around the globe to do this solution like with digital systems and in real time, in real life, like measuring. Actually, we just did some agriculture project in Colombia where we had to turn down some avocado trees. I like avocado very much. That was very hurtful for me. But we had to turn them down, and we had to measure exactly how much carbon is in their wood, and how much carbon is in their food, and everything. And how the soil, we had to measure the soil. We had to take that to the lab. So we do that in parallel so that we can understand that the model actually can be applied to those measurements. And then you have the tons of CO2. One barrier that we have encountered, and I believe that's something that we will discuss during the panel, is that you have to find a validation and verification body that is willing to change from reading a PDD that is very long. I don't like reading PDDs. I like more looking at data and graphs and dashboards. But finding a VVV that is willing to take a look at, are actually those data points the right ones? Is actually that model the right one? And check off those algorithms if you are applying them correctly and see that the data quality is correct. And that's our approach for different DMRV solutions that we are testing around the globe. It can be around, we have some in industry, in landfill gas, like commercial facilities, of course, agriculture, forestry. So that's what we are doing in that sense, and we hope that in the future you can actually like issue the carbon units as you go, and you will bring down some barriers, giving actually easier access to the market for the projects so that they can have at the end a better cash flow, because we know that cash flow is very important. And for example, you cannot have indigenous communities waiting 6 months to get some money, because it's actually a big problem. That's actually how we see technology and digitized MRV solution can bring. That's what they can bring to the table, and that's how they can actually not just bring some integrity and enhance the market quality, also give access to a market that can move faster, and then we can scale it. Once you have all the data, once you have all the models, you can scale the market very easily. And that's how we see it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Juan. Ryan, do you want to sit or do you want to come up? Your preference. Okay, all right. Ryan Arsenault, Carbon AI.
Afternoon, everyone. We can skip off this last slide. I think it's been up there for a bit. Perfect. I'll just give you guys a brief overview on what we're up to at Carbon AI, and then we can get into the conversation that I think is actually of more value to everybody. So Our business at Carbon AI is split into two distinct elements. We are a full-cycle offset project developer. We target large-scale emissions reductions with a focus on immediate impact. So we're looking in a number of different jurisdictions, focused primarily on flare gas reductions projects. That's the project side of the business. We are active in 5 or 6 jurisdictions right now. We've got a large funnel of projects that are coming through our pipeline, some that are already credited, other ones are different stages of feasibility and construction. The other side of the business, which is really important to this conversation, is this what we call our solutions platform. So our solutions platform's a multi-layer architecture framework that we utilize to better measure and manage emissions and emissions reductions. And it's an interesting group of people on the panel. There's so many different actors that play together within the ecosystem to get source data all the way through to registry data, and we make up a couple of key components in that system. My background is in industrial automation and measurement. We really like measurement points. We like measuring data for projects. We think that measured emissions reductions projects are the most real and the most easy to prove. So my background is in industrial automation. I've got historical framework of adding multi-thousand point IOs on an industrial setting, control system measurement. So first mile data is, I hear a lot of people talk about how hard it is to grab first mile data. That's our business. Very experienced. We've got over 12,500 connected devices in North America running on our platform, collecting source data on a real-time basis. We run our own private IoT network. But there's what I see as a large gap in data collection for emissions reductions projects is manually collected data. So I call it human-generated data, but anything that human beings go out and do that isn't able to be managed or measured. And we've got an element of our platform that automates and tracks human-generated data workflows, online or offline. A lot of these projects that we talk about, especially on the nature-based side, are very remote. I come from a place called Alberta in Canada, very remote. So our platform was developed with the capability to measure these instances online or offline. Devices sync back when you get back to a cellular network or a Wi-Fi network. And we also we've got the ability to manage dynamic sources of data, which we reference on the metering side, static data sources, and human-generated workflow data. And we take all 3 of those elements, which could be thousands of devices, it could be thousands of inspections if it's on the human side, depending on your project type. Take all that data, we integrate it into our data aggregation system in the cloud, and that enters the next piece. And we've got connective tissue on our platform. We feel that the best project types are those that have every data point in the project is measurable, auditable, and traceable. So we've taken care of the auditability and traceability side on the data collection. The next piece that we saw a lot of room for improvement on is the calculation engine side, or what we call our crediting engine. So once you grab all of this information and you need to visualize it and create what Joe refers to as the outcome, and it's protocol agnostic, so you can configure our platform to execute any outcome that you have a desire to visualize, is the ability for the VVV to go into the platform post-outcome and trace every data point and every calculation element back to its root data source. So in the typical sense, pre-DMRV, and our business doesn't do this, so I look at that as the old way of doing it. You've got environmental scientists grabbing information, collating it on a series of spreadsheets. They take those spreadsheets, add them to other spreadsheets, end up building up, at the end, a monitoring report. But through the process of adding data that was collected from different sources to spreadsheets, it's no longer traceable. You can't prove that the third spreadsheet along the way of this commingling of data, where that information actually came from. So our goal in our platform is for the verifier to be able to trace back every single data point back to its root data source. In some instances, that's someone on the ground in Ghana or a telemetry device that we've got connected in Egypt. So our platform on any given day is running in 13 to 15 countries, and we've got about, I think we're over 2 million pieces of technical content that's loaded, so we can ingest content, pictures, files, data like that. Also the live data streams, the human workflow stuff. So I'll stop there and we can jump right into the conversation.
Thanks, Ryan. So thank you, panelists. Now the fun stuff. Let's get to some questions. Integrity is key. It's been, as I said at the start, it's been a tough year for carbon, specifically, I think, voluntary carbon. How do we if we look at DMRV, is it an actual solution? Can we actually solve the integrity question? I'll throw it out to the floor, anyone who's interested in answering it, but how do we make sure that DMRV is going to deliver on the promise that it can have? Ryan, you want to start it off?
I think the way that question is phrased, there's a lot of uncertainty on whether a digitized solution provides the same outcome basis as what would be what we can achieve on the manual side. The obvious answer for me is yes. It's an automated process. Juan touched on it. Banktesh went into detail on. We've done this thousands of times already. The process can be automated. What we've seen through adding traceability and auditability into our projects that we've been involved with, and we've got historical markers for what the outcomes looked like prior to digitization and what the outcomes look like post-digitization. I don't think there's any argument around auditability and transparency of data. There's massive gaps in the current manual processes that can be alleviated using technology. On the error side, there's different types of errors that we talk about regularly and risk points that we look at when we're looking at different project applications. One is just human beings making errors and calculations and things like that. And digitization can fix that, or it can actually promote it, depending if the algorithms are running with the wrong data modality, you're going to take something that was a small problem and make it a lot bigger. So a lot of care and concern needs to be taken around error checking inside the system, advanced analytics on the data outcomes themselves, and we track those on multiple levels, whether you've got financial alerts or outcome-based alerts. So if you're expecting a certain yield off your project and the project is starting to trend outside that yield base, what we saw in the past was, one of my favorite analogies is when you got to your verification stage and you didn't have the data collected yet, you'd close your eyes and cross your fingers and hope for an outcome that somewhat aligned with what your expectations were. So having real-time feedback into a platform and straight into the registry one day, hopefully, really changes your ability to respond to trigger points, whether they're data trigger points or you've got a forestry issue that someone needs to get their head around, hopefully before it's a verification period. So I'll stop there. But
Great. Yeah, please.
Yeah, so from our perspective, it's a question of, and you mentioned that very good, like the data that we can measure on the field is the right data. That's the first question. Is it right or wrong? Are we measuring it right or not? That's the second question. And the third question is, does the model apply to what we want to quantify? That's like the third question. I will actually make an example, and please forgive me if it shows that I'm trying to be like very objective, but I'm going to move from the carbon area more in the SDG. For example, one time we were analyzing how to measure zero hunger, for example, in a project, like how to measure that SDG, that impact specifically. and change it from being a checkbox and a lot of writing, and then it's more like who can write more or who can write best or better or more beautiful. Changing it to an objective data, and I was asking everybody, are we willing, for example, to go and take blood samples from all the community, like on a monthly basis, and quantify and specifically get some data about what is going on and what is happening? Are we willing to go into that direction? And then the conversation moved into another direction. If we could do that, if it was legally, if we will have some legally problems or something, the conversation went into that direction. But actually what I'm trying to say is, if we want to have performance indicators that really attack the problem that we want to assess or have an indicator of the problem, then we need to find the right measurement that give us the KPI that we are looking for. And that's how we can move from a subjective quantification to an objective quantification. And in that case, then we really will have digitized MRV solutions. And then
Yeah, that's all true. But one thing about integrity is, are we just looking at integrity of the data and parameters or integrity of the program in itself? Let's say we saw a violation of integrity somehow. Can we get back to normal, like integral solution again, quickly? If we have a digital solution, yes. If not, it may not be possible. Just an example, at the program level, we figured out, for example, methane emission factor of a certain process has come down rather than up, right? So emission factor comes down means our net emission reduction has now gone up. So how do we fix all the credits that have been issued? It is impossible right now because we don't know. I mean, I shouldn't say impossible. It will take a lot of time and effort to figure out which projects are using what and then what values. If we had this solution digitally, it's simple running a query to say, get me all the emission factors, all the projects where emission factor is this particular default. Now we can apply the patch and then every credits will come as integral again, very quickly, without any problem. Maybe in some cases, participants won't even know because we found out the issue, program level we fix it. At the program we said all the default factors should be changed to X amount. But implementation could be much, much quicker if we have DMR, all the data and process digitally. Mm-hmm. And avoiding the problem also occurs when methodology got updated. But all these projects that are in pipeline or stakeholders templates, they are in Word documents, they will forget that update. And then eventually at the validation, someone, well, it's just a regular field, we don't need to worry about it. It will just go unnoticed until late in the time, right, if we find it. However, if we have digital solutions, when we talk about API to API communication, we have to fix at one place. This parameter doesn't exist, so any submission will automatically reject it. So we won't get any new projects. And at the time of updating the projects, the system will tell us, hey, something is wrong with it. So yes, it is possible, but digitalization is not going to say it will maintain the integrity, but it will get us achieve integrity quicker and easily.
Great. Thanks.
Are you looking for me to comment? Yeah, so I
Only if you want.
would agree with all of the things, but I think some of it is it's a level of standardization. So digital MRV is like a term that's thrown out, and there's not a standard for actual digital MRV. And I'll take an example, like if you look at the different roles where, for example, like Juan, what you're doing, like that can actually be standardized and you can be part of that. And then and so you're kind of making your own standard in that way. But if someone else says they're doing the same thing, then you have to say, well, this is different than that, and that everybody has to get to a certain bar. Similarly, I think, Ryan, with some of the things you were saying, if you think about some of the industrial processes, you need global recognition of some of those, right? So the operations that go on in Africa in an oil and gas operation, that you're managing also need to sort of flow into something that somebody else is doing in Texas that you're not managing, right? So there's somebody else doing that role. So you have to get to some level of aggregation, and like this role exists, and in order to get this outcome, you do those things. And so I think taking that knowledge and tying it into that level of standardization, you can start to scale up. But I think what you're already doing looks a lot like that. But somebody else is doing something and saying it's different, and that's wrong, and da-da-da-da-da. And so I think there's a level of understanding that has to evolve really quickly here in order, otherwise it devolves, and everybody's sort of devaluing or undermining the integrity that's actually being generated.
Great, thank you. One of the things we talk about as an organization is immediacy of impact. It's an important concept that drives what we do. We try to really put a premium on the things that are going to have the largest impact possible immediately as possible. And the challenge we have for migrating from the current system that we have today to maybe a digital MRV world is, in some ways, a human issue, in that we are used to doing things a certain way today. A lot of those processes, how we create the sausage, how we make the sausage, how we bake the cake, is in many ways a manual process today. Part of that is governed by just, it's what we know, it's how we do it. But part of it is also based on standards, like ISO 14064, which governs greenhouse gas accounting. So the question of the panel is, how do we accelerate that process? Because change is hard, from moving from where we are today to where we need to go, knowing that speed is important. We have to move at the speed of the problem. So how do we accelerate that? How do we get from point A to point B faster?
Do we have a standard?
Well, say it. You create or recognize the value. So if you create the incentive, people will go there, right? So I think that's the fastest thing you can possibly do, is start to, if you can move in a direction that pays, people will move in that direction. So I look at it from that's why we were talking about capital formation. So a lot of what's happening, regardless of whether it's carbon markets and carbon development, or whether it's a hydrogen plant, or a carbon capture, it's finance. So if you can start to get to a level where the folks that are the capital providers are starting to send signals of what that value looks like, people adjust really fast if they get paid. It's not a picture of an orangutan anymore. It's a financial. When I say picture of an orangutan on a sustainability brochure, that is really just a marketing exercise. This is like fundamental financial value that's either being created or destroyed. So as soon as those signals become clear, you'll see a rapid evolution around integrity. I don't think that has happened. I think this exercise we've been through in the last year in carbon is one example, but if you look at the lending markets and some of the bonds and greenwashing and the other things, massive destruction of value.
Great, thanks.
I want to pick up on what Joe was saying. Actually, if you see that credits could get a premium if they use a digitized MRV solution, that would be great, because then everybody will go there.
Yeah.
and that's without question.
Mm-hmm.
The second point is actually something that you said earlier, and I believe right now we're working in silos. Like everybody's doing their own. We are not working together, and that's the need of standardizing, of course. Actually, sadly, the standardized mechanism like ISO does not work as fast as
So on some levels,
I don't know if it works.
You're driving another level. So, but
Exactly.
So sorry. Where I was going is, I think the financial institutions, once they understand the difference, they can actually price that very, very quickly.
Exactly. And then again, back to the standardization. What we're doing right now is that we do it in a digitized way, but we also automatically generate the PDD as everybody wants to see. So it's like a double effort. You have to do the work twice, but that's the way it has to. It is today, but we do need to push as AITA members, as everybody, like, okay, let's go in that direction because that's where we need to go, and we need to go all together. And that's why I value the work that you are doing, that everybody's doing.
Great.
Just to add my perspective on this one is, yes, somehow if we can, I mean, DMRV is a technological product. They do deliver nothing if they are not adopted. So in this case, asking for premium price is one thing, but again, that is a consumer's decision. Just because a credit was issued based on a digital process, we may call it integral from the perspective of credit itself, from the consumer's perspective, but the producer's perspective is a little bit different here. Just because you utilize a computer, your credit is premium, could be a issue later on, right? And for organization who issue these credits, now they are saying, oh, my one credit type, which was issued from digital process, is more integral than others, means why don't you fix it? Stop issuing that, a non-digital asset. So there will be a transitioning phase where, everything will move until everything moves up to digital process. But incentive in terms of something that we all can think of is, can they prefer digital credits from the consumer's perspective? If they prefer, they know it could be better, so things could move faster in the pipeline. Right now, from the producer's perspective, if we can create and offer such a solution where project activity on the ground to issuance of the credit can move faster. So if we have that fast process, producer can produce more VCUs sooner, consumers can receive the same credit sooner. So that is one idea to incentivize in terms of speed. That is also money.
I would add to that on the developer side, and it's probably not quite there yet, but we look into the future and we see a state where project developers are in a tough spot. You guys are doing a lot of great work to unlock the finance. One of the pieces of your guys' platform is the finance side. And I enjoy our conversations because when Joe and I talk, it ends up always back to a state of homogeneous layers of inputs and outcomes. And it doesn't need, I think that's really important. Otherwise, you start getting silification of data elements and people prioritize or creating IP or what they believe to be IP in certain elements of the market, which just slows things down. But in the future, what I think is going to happen, and I think you guys would agree with me, is we'll move to an expedited state of serialization or registry outcomes, which increases the speed that developers get paid, which increases the speed that we can recycle dollars back into the ecosystem. And that's where you're going to start to see a multiplication effect and an exponential curve. If the finance is trapped at the top layer or the bottom layer, if the developers aren't getting paid, they can't recycle the dollars back in, and it slows the whole system down.
Thanks. I'll throw a question out to Venkatesh. Obviously, Vera being such an important part of the greenhouse gas ecosystem, has also been under a pretty bright spotlight around scalability. What are you hearing? What is Vera hearing from its customers? Is there a pull? Is there a pull for DMRV, whether it be from project developers, from buyers? Or is it something that you feel like Vera is having to push onto the market?
It's mostly a pull from the stakeholders. So they want a system that can make things easier. Right now, we all understand handling multiple projects at a faster speed is very, very time consuming and error prone. I was a project developer once. So it's a very tedious process. One little keystroke error makes a large difference. So it's coming from stakeholders However, not all stakeholders are at the same level. For smallholders, there might be some issues in terms of cost of using these technologies. So we are trying to make sure that cost comes down, because technology should not be expensive. Technology should make things cheaper. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Joe, Expansive and now Future's been kind of on the cutting edge of some really cool stuff for a number of years now. What are you hearing from the people, the different groups that you guys deal with? What do you hear about when you guys talk about something that, in some ways, people have a hard time getting their head around because it's so different than the world we're in today? So if you understand the world as it looks today, and you're trying to get your head around what the world looks like potentially tomorrow, what are you guys hearing?
Well, so it's interesting. So some of the things that we did in different fields, right? So we did a fairly massive, I'll call it beta in fuels, but all of the learnings from that can be applied elsewhere. So what seems really abstract all of a sudden becomes very tangible when people understand that they can apply it to solve their problem. Mm-hmm. So we've seen a sea change in the last, I'm going to say, 120 days where it was kind of like you were talking about an app before people knew what an app was. Then all of a sudden, when they realize what an app is, the banks are like, well, I can make an app, and people could have it on their phone, and that's going to change the way, and the store is, and the pizza delivery guy, and all of the people start thinking about that. So we're seeing that like in real time where a light bulb goes off, and then people say, well, I could use this to solve my problem in this way. And you know, a person with a data center then runs and starts solving a problem. A person that is faced with fossil lending challenges starts running and solving a problem. So I would say that that's been a radical shift in 120 days, whereas basically you were talking about the same thing over and over and over, and then all of a sudden people just started consuming it. So when we look at this, we really see almost like applications where these programs could be financed by external parties and deliver royalties. So people get behind that, and there's an incentive to create something that drives integrity, and the people that use it get the benefit of driving or integrity. So you're starting to see this kind of flywheel effect. But I would say that until recently felt like I was always talking another language.
Okay. One, Eco-Registry, you guys work with a lot of jurisdictions and programs that are just getting up off the ground. So the analogy we often talk about when we think about opportunities in Africa is that in the telecommunications sector, in many places in Africa, they were able to skip the very expensive build-out of building phone lines. Everyone went straight to wireless. So there's a huge impact of just being able to go right to that step. But what are you seeing? Are people trusting this new DMRV type approach, or do they still want the old stuff? What are you hearing?
I will tell you one experience that we lived in Colombia a long time ago, or that we keep living in Colombia. I always say I used to work in the energy sector, and I used to work for the independent system operator of Colombia, and I loved working there because we were like the lab rats from the Americans. So for me it was amazing because the laboratories from the Northwestern, whatever laboratory, Pacific Northwestern, whatever laboratory, they wanted to test their latest technology for measurement system for lines, for power lines, and for real-time simulation. And what did we get from that? Free stuff that we could test and play with, and we would implement. It would cost less for the Americans because if something were wrong, we would have a blackout in Colombia and not in the US. So it was actually very good for us. And I believe that's the view from the developing countries, When they get this type of solutions, they are happy to test because they don't have anything to lose. They are just happy to test. They have a lot to gain and nothing to lose. That's my perspective around that.
Great, thank you. I think it was Venkateshwar made a comment earlier about, how do you get adoption on DMRV is you make it pay. I think it was your comment on that. Ryan, I'd like to know if, there's any instances you can think of where you've seen a real difference, maybe specifically on first mile data, where taking a more high integrity data-based approach makes it pay.
But you're asking the wrong person probably, because my answer would be it always pays. Automation of processes. You've got a really important efficiency point that's driven through these processes, which we've done some exercises on some projects that we've been involved with. A single project type that had a multi-thousand point human inspection layer to it. We saved, I'll get the number wrong, so somebody will get mad at me, but it was around 80,000 man-hours of labor, person-hours of labor, through the execution of a 2-year project and inspection cycle. So when you start layering that level of efficiency into a project type, and those are direct hours of people going out into the field, spending their time. What we didn't measure, and we don't think we had enough data points to actually get it accurately, so we didn't do it, was all the soft layers associated with the elements of that data. So someone going out into the field as a human being and writing something down on a piece of paper, one, there's auditing issues, there's transparency issues. Did that person do that thing at that time? So I think it's important that you use or authenticate, geostamp, and timestamp every data point. That's how you add auditability into a system. But the efficiency of that getting thrown right up into the cloud is, I'm sure it's measurable. That was the one that we didn't measure. The other aspect that I think you're probably talking about is integrity of data and issuance issues when you've got a VVV going in and doing and this is still going to happen. I think it doesn't matter how far we go in the digitization sphere. You're always going to have manual verification inspections, whether it's on a randomly generated basis or certain data sets are going to get subjected to different levels of VVV. So probably the biggest example I can see is we took a manual human-generated inspection process. We digitized it completely. There's still human beings going and doing something, but we digitized and made that process auditable. We saw error discount rate on their entire yield on that program go from 8% to less than 1%. So that project developer, who wasn't us, saw a massive financial benefit. That was in the millions of dollars on this project type that they were involved with. So
Great.
I think that's probably a pretty typical integrity increase that you'd see.
Excellent. I'm going to save a few questions for the end, but I might just open it up to the audience. If there was anyone that had specific questions, we'll probably take 3 or 4 questions right now if we can. Sir, please introduce yourself too. And keep your questions pretty concise so we can get to as many as possible. Thank you.
Good night. My name is Daniel, forest engineer. I'm a technical director at Moss, a company from Brazil. So I have a question because in Brazil we have 8 million of rural properties, and we can work with 0.1% of the rural properties with the currently standards. And then if we use the DMRV, we can increase and go to, I don't know, 10%. So when we are talking about Brazil, this is a huge potential to produce carbon using the AI and all this process. However, I think that when we are producing carbon using DMRV, a new standard, new methodology, what will happen to accommodate the market with the project that is ongoing? Because we are working with Red Plus project that are very expensive. We are expend a lot of time, a lot of money, and when this all technology, this is very good, is starting to work our project. I'd like to understand how the market will accommodate all this changing to improve our possibilities.
So if I get the question, when the market moves to DVDs, what happens to the cassette-based projects? Is that roughly the question? Thank you.
I'll take a run at it first. I don't think that is a huge risk. So what we're talking about doing is digitizing processes. So we're already in the business of digitizing protocols that exist today. You can do them our way, or you can do them the paper way. And in some instances on our project development side, we do it both ways because we have to. So our preference would be not to be writing down huge monitoring reports. So a lot of the information, because it's very standardized and repeatable, we push a button in the platform and it spits out a large element of the monitoring report that someone historically would write by hand. But the protocol hasn't changed. We're still having the same effect and the same outcome. So if you've got a historical project type, I don't think that there's a risk that you're not going to be able to play your VHS tape anymore in the when we used to have those things. So I don't know if I just said how old I was, but you will still be able to play the same old movie. Those project types will stay valid. Now, I think what you'll see is a transition, because once you digitize and the efficiency changes, you're not going to want to do it that way anymore. And so what you'll probably see is a more efficient vehicle to market, which will enact quicker finance, quicker serialization. So if you don't transition in the future, this is my view, your projects will be less economic.
Got it.
So in terms of a little funny, okay? If you are watching that VHS now, the process has already started. Now you got a DVD, what do? You pause that VHS, put on a DVD, and you start high quality product from there, right? So the process, if you have a project that is already in process of registration or validation, then only it will matter. Otherwise, it will be seamless, because we are digitizing the process, as he mentioned.
Great.
Can I just make one comment? I think we should move to streaming and skip the DVD.
Okay. I'm older.
No, from my perspective, and I believe one changes, you can't do it on, you can't have a shifting plan, like how to change to this new technology. One risk that I do see is that it can be that with this new technology, projects will get less credits. That's very important. But on the other hand, they will get faster access to the market, and maybe, or actually, I'm pretty confident that buyers will appreciate that more, and they will pay a premium for those specific, more valuable credits. So it's a compromise that you have to face. That's the only risk I see. But yes, on the other hand, just change to streaming right away. Yeah?
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I believe you don't know what VHS is. He is very old.
I think we'll have a chance for two, but please keep your questions concise, and maybe we'll get to 4 questions. Thank you.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Chris from Chile. There are several things that fit on my head today, but just to summarize, we have some digital MRVs running into some industrial facilities. They hire us to develop the system because they wanted to reduce the cost of their verifications and being certain that the data will be there when the verifiers come in. But at the end, as was said here, verifiers, they are used to the spreadsheets, to the PDF. So at the end, we have everything 100% automated, but we at the end, when the auditors come in, we convert everything to CVS and so on, CSV files?
Yes. Yeah.
So they feel comfortable and they can replicate the process. And we are okay on that because we understand that we have to build confidence on what we are doing through the digital solution, and that's part of the process that kind of Venkatesh was saying. But that's where my concern comes, because maybe some definition from your side in terms of saying if you're a BBB and you face a project where they have a digital MRV, try to try to find a place where they add value, because the value is added to the project developers. The value is added to the ecosystem in general, because we have more confidence on the project outcomes. But it seems that the first industry to be disrupted will be the auditors.
I'm going to take this question, actually, because I think it's a really good one.
So it's a kind of asking the hotels to develop Airbnb. So how can we, that we are facing this type of barriers, we as technology developers can move this forward if the standards don't help us in order to make them to be open to this type of solutions?
So I think there's a real human element to that. So, the history for someone who is my vintage and has seen ups and downs in this industry over the last 15 years, I think there has been a real valid concern amongst VVV bodies is that are they being disintermediated? My point would be this, and this is something definitely we've seen when we've demoed our platform and had VVB bodies in and look at it, is that they are used to doing things a certain way. They are concerned that if we go to a DMRV process that there won't be work. But if you look at the scale of the problem, if you look at the scale that this industry needs to get to, there will be no shortage of work for DMRV bodies. There will always be a need to get that third-party stamp, that third-party view on a piece of work, on a project, but the work is going to be different, right?
You reduce the entry barriers.
Yes, absolutely.
You don't need the same level of certification.
Yeah. But I think to get those VVB bodies comfortable, they have to feel that the markets are going to scale. Because guess what? A VVB body won't be able to just review one project a quarter or one project a month or a handful of projects. They should be able to review 500, 1,000. They will need to. If we need to scale these markets, we need to do more, faster, better. And we need VVB bodies to move along as well. But it's a human dimension. I think we'll only have time for one more question, and then we'll go to some...
Can I just say one thing to that? So I actually think the VV, they can actually scale in the right construct and get paid when it runs.
Yes.
So when it streams, their work can actually be, so you can actually build and codify that into the construct so they get paid. So I think there's two sides to that. Both, it needs to scale so there's no shortage of work, but they can also embed their stuff in programs that works for specific applications, and they get paid over time.
Great. Thank you. We'll take one last question. This gentleman here. Yep, thank you.
Hi, Vincent Haller from Yale School of the Environment, from Chile also. I appreciate the improvements. Last summer I measured 7,000 trees, and I would love some traceability on that. But on the other hand, the biggest criticism on the sector is actually on how to account for counterfactuals, at least in the forestry sector, with IFM and RIP+ methodologies. And that I'm curious about how do you think, because that's on the methodological side, not on necessarily the process improvement side. If you feel like these improvement, this is an opportunity to make a contribution to solve that methodological problem from counterfactuals in forestry projects, or it's more a risk of accelerating something that might need to be reviewed properly.
Anyone have a strong view on that?
So my view wouldn't be on forestry specifically. I'm not a forestry expert, but I think what I've seen in certain, especially on the voluntary side, on the non-metered project type, is what I call it deficient protocol design, but I think it's deeper than that. It's not that someone actually intended to have a deficient project protocol design. It's the way that you collect information has changed considerably over the period of time that those protocols have been around. So you probably were watching VHS tapes not knowing we were going to be streaming Netflix 15 years later. Like, the advance of technology has been substantial. So when I look at certain types of protocols, and we look at a lot of protocols, I think that there's more, the counterfactual argument obviously is there, but there is a lot of benefit. I think, and it's, project types are so diverse, but the ability to add transparency and auditability into protocol designs that don't currently have it, so is, I think, going to add a lot of weight to that argument. You always have to keep an eye out for counterfactuals. What's going to happen? And Ivan, you can add to it on the forestry side. You know a lot more about the trees than I do, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the areas that we've been trying to work on as a company is how do we make modeled projects look more like metered projects? And I think you can get part of the way there. Part of it is how you collect data to provide a lot more assurance, a lot more integrity, a lot more auditability into how that data is collected. But with a model project type, I think you'll always end up with an element of uncertainty. But it's how do you drive that down so that it doesn't impact the perceived integrity of the project and the quality of the tons that are generated from those projects. I want to be very conscious of time. We did, I think, start about 15 minutes late with the previous session sort of taking a while to get off stage. But I did want to close with, I think, on a note of optimism. I think everyone who's here at this conference and goes to COPs and participates in this space, I think, is here trying to solve problems. We are trying to solve one of the world's biggest challenges that it's ever faced. It takes a lot of people. It takes a lot of people working together to make this happen. I'd like for you guys to take out your crystal balls and think forward perhaps 2, 3, maybe 5 years. How are we doing things differently? How are we scaling these markets with integrity, delivering better transparency and auditability? What does it look like 5 years from now? Who wants to start? In a minute or less. Sure.
I think you just have a new asset class. It's carbon is the global asset.
I think you just have an asset class. Carbon's a global asset class. Nobody even thinks about it. So all the things we're talking about look like horses and buggies. It doesn't even exist anymore. So it's digital cameras to Kodak. It's in the rear view.
Okay.
What's the timeline? How far?
You got a minute.
No, timeline. How far into the future?
5 years.
5 years. I think in 5 years you're going to see real-time serialization of whatever the outcome is that we're measuring. So that already exists in other markets. We're not waiting for people to grab their spreadsheets and realize our bank transactions. That doesn't happen anymore, right? So I think it'll be a conversion of what we're already doing in other commodity classes. And it's funny because carbon's a digital commodity, so you'd think it would be faster on the digital front. But I think real-time serialization with very smart modeled or machine learning integrated error analysis, which will trigger meaningful verification exercises.
Great.
I think in 5 years, the project developers are really focused on developing project activities and ensuring project exist. Baseline emission monitoring, etc., are happening background at the system, and depending on their request, the issuance are issued by the system itself. Automation, validation, verification happening. User don't need to analyze the data. It will be analyzed for them by these systems and platforms.
Thank you. To add to what everybody said, I see the VVVs and the standards actually just looking at dashboards and data points and actually understanding which projects look weird and then going deep only into those projects so that everything can be more automated. That's very important. And the other thing, to answer to your question, that will be that methodologies will be changing faster. We will have new methodologies changing faster because new technologies will come along, and new models will come along.
Great. Thank you. Well, I want to say thank you to you all for joining us. Great questions from the audience, so thank you very much. And thank you to each of our panelists. Venkatesh Sharma, Joe Madden, Juan Duran, Ryan Arsenault, thank you so much for joining us and enlightening us with some great thoughts. Thank you very much. Oh, yes, sorry. Most important, we have a cocktail reception downstairs. Please join us for some refreshments that are probably needed after a long day. Thank you very much.